Hey everyone, it's Millie.
It's Gabby.
And we're Changed by Degrees.
Yep.
And this week we have a special guest.
Hey guys, it's me, Tim.
It's Tim.
This is our first guest ever.
The
I know,
first?
The very first,
That's
which is
awesome.
kind of shocking because
You know what? I'm glad that I'm the first.
There
So
you go.
it'll be a downhill slide for everybody else that you have after here.
exactly
No,
you're
I
setting
agree
the
with that.
precedent. So don't-
or the bar very low. So one of the
we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see where we
We'll
are in
see.
50 minutes.
I-
and then
But I'm so excited for this though.
I am too.
It's kind of going to be an interview moment. Getting Tim actually recently started a podcast, so we
Yeah.
thought we really
So we
wanted
thought we'd
to have him
promote that a
on.
little
We have
bit.
to promote
Yeah.
that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
And then as a fellow creative, just kind of see how he works, his workflow, struggles that he's had and how he's overcome them.
Yeah.
We'll see where this conversation goes. Like always, we always wing it. So
And we talk a lot.
and we talk
so-
a lot.
Hey,
But
I'm
we're
good
gonna-
at talking.
Tim will fit right in.
Yeah.
I
It'll
talk
be
a lot
good.
too.
So
I have long stories. It's
that's
gonna be
okay.
awesome.
That's okay.
that's why
We have a
this
timer
is why we
on.
have a
Yeah.
podcast.
Keep
So we
us
can talk about
focused.
the things that we want to talk about. And no one else has to like it. We just
Preach.
do it. So I guess let's start. Tell us about your new podcast.
Oh wow. Okay, so my new podcast, it's called the Morning Tea Podcast.
Love
It
that.
is
Love the name.
I'm all about spilling the tea. Not really, but I am. That's a lie. I love spilling the tea.
Yes.
But so I kind of had this idea really for a little over a year now about talking about like how creatives fail and how they overcome that failure. And one of the things that I really was like just I don't know, really enamored by is that like I feel like we live like as creatives or just as people in general on social media like these scented glossy magazine lives where everything is like a magazine cover, everything's perfect. We don't allow people to enter our lives and see the mess that we are, or we don't let people see when we fail. You know, I don't think I've ever posted or ever seen someone say, you know what, I really messed up today.
Yeah. No one wants to do that.
Nobody wants to be that person.
Yeah.
So I just kind of felt like this, like talking about failure was going to give people the opportunity to like really live an authentic life, I guess, or really maybe not authentic life, but be able to like be like, yeah, hey, I have this life that I live online, but deep down inside, I struggle with things too, or I have struggled with things. So that's kind of where it was and where the idea kind of came from. And as I kind of just like sat on it, I finally had to take some of my own advice and get off my rear and kind of just get it started.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No.
so that's
So
kind of what it's
cool.
about.
We identify with that.
Yeah. As every time we do this podcast, we're like, you know what? This
That
might
probably
end
didn't
up,
go so well, but you got to
It's
put it out
okay.
there.
You put it
Yeah.
out there anyway. And
Yeah.
One
We-
of the next
yeah.
questions leading up to that was it obvious that
Yeah.
failure was part of that creative process to you from the start, or did you learn that like the deeper you went into your craft?
So, you know, I always have to tell people this because I feel like, you know, I've been working as a full-time creative since I was about 23. I guess I've done like all sorts of different things. I worked at DreamWorks Studios as an assistant film editor. I worked at a church as a creative director for, a long time and still do. And now, you know, I'm in charge of a lot of other things, but like other than that, and I'm also a full-time wedding photographer and I like creating films. I work on political ads, political campaigns and stuff like that. So I've always had the desire to create ever since I was a little kid. I remember, gosh, I'm about to date myself here. when I was a kid, my dad, like on Sunday after church or whatever. Well, we didn't go to church on Sunday; those are for heathens. So we went to church on Saturday. We went to church on Saturday. We were a Saturday churchgoer because we were raised Seventh-day Adventists. But on Sunday, what we would do is my dad would go to like Blockbuster.
Love it.
we would
I
pick up-
remember.
I love Blockbuster.
I,
You love
I'm,
Blockbuster?
I'm old enough to remember Blockbuster.
To remember Blockbuster.
Well, you're not old enough to have been at Blockbuster and picked out one movie.
I have.
Okay, we'll see.
I have. So we would go to like Blockbuster and my dad would rent like 10 movies. And what we would do on Sunday, we would just like watch films. And my dad was really into all sorts of like just different stuff. So I grew up loving film and wanting to be a filmmaker. That's kind of where I pursued it from when I graduated high school. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I either wanted to do photography or film. And I went to a school that didn't have a film program, so I did photojournalism instead. But I always tell people like I was always kind of enamored with the aspect of failure because like I felt like I went through that as an late teen, I guess, 18, 19, because I thought at the time that I was too big for my britches. And then I got a nice like quick punched in the throat as a throat punch, where my parents, my dad at the time, like where he kicked me out of the house, and I had to, I pretty much slept in my car for about 8 weeks. So that's a major part of like who I am, like that disappointment and living in that failure of like, hey, my dad asked me to do one thing, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So what ended up happening at that time was the consequence was after like the 20th time was like, like, hey, here's your DVD player and your trash bag full of clothes, deuces, right? So, and I spent a long time being embarrassed by that. So it was just kind of like, but then in the same sense, I was super resentful.
Yeah. No, I would.
Like resentful. Like I remember like the last thing that my dad said to me at the time, when he cracked open the door as I was taking my last bag of clothes to my Honda Civic. And my dad was like, hey, Tim, you will never make it in the real world. You have no clue how difficult it is. And to me, like, I was just like, I was just like, screw that. Like, like I'm gonna spend the next however long it takes to prove my dad wrong. And that resentment is what kind of kept me motivated and going forward. So yeah, that's kind of like where like, sleeping in my car and being like, how am I going to earn enough money to get my first apartment? Because I had no money saved.
Yeah.
I wasn't about that life when I was young.
Save money.
I wasn't about that life back then. And so from there and to where I'm at today, and being able to do something that I love and do things that I love is a privilege, really, that I feel like a lot of people don't have. So I take it seriously, and I take the failures and the things that I've created that have sucked or have gone horribly wrong, and I've tried to learn from those. So that's kind of where I wanted to hear what other creatives thought about that as well. So that was a really long-winded answer
No, it was a good one, though.
to answer that question. Yeah.
And I think it's good because like I think a lot of people think that you can become a become quote unquote a creative person or be a creative person without experiencing the failure that like whatever you're going to produce first is going to be good because you did it and whatever and it's going to be accepted. But it's like that's not true for every like 10 things you do that you think are really good. There's going to be one that is really good and then the other 9 like suck. Like, and it's just trial and error, and you just have to keep up almost with like what other people are doing in order to become better.
Yeah. I think the thing is with like any of that or with all of that, to be 100% honest, is it's not only like looking at what other people are doing, but it's like stealing from other people and kind of remixing it and making it your own.
Nothing is original anymore.
No, it really isn't. And like the thing is like you've got to like really embrace the suck, because that's what comes as a life. Not everyone's gonna like everything you do.
Yeah.
And you got to be willing to take the criticism with that as well, even if it sucks. Like the criticism sucks, and sometimes it hurts, and sometimes it's hurtful, and sometimes when it's coming from people that you love and people that you respect.
Yeah.
So not to be so bullheaded that you can't accept criticism, but being bullheaded to realize that, hey man, not every idea is going to be a great idea.
Right.
And that's okay too.
Yeah. And a lot of times I think like and I've experienced this before where I do something and then it goes out into the world and it's totally rejected. And then it comes back and I'm like, no, I still stand behind this. Like, I still think it's, and other things come back and I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. You're right. But other things, like, I really do enjoy. And I'm like, you know what? I still stand behind this. Like, you hated it, but I still 100% like think this was really good.
Yeah.
So it's that other thing too, that you have to balance. Just because someone else hates it doesn't mean it's bad. Like, you can still, you still have like the wherewithal to say genuinely like, no, this was a good product or this was a good whatever you're creating. I don't think that like criticism is the like end all, because half the time people who are consuming it don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Full stop. And I always tell people that haters or people that like criticize you or being critical of you often are never going to be as critical of you as you are.
Yeah.
Like no one thinks more about you than you.
For sure.
We think people think about us, but really they don't. Like them thinking about us is a byproduct of them thinking about themselves. So I know that every creative is insecure to a level that they're nervous to put what they create out into the world. And sometimes you just kind of have to rip off that Band-Aid and just be like,
Yeah.
okay, even if this sucks, something that I create sucks, it's better to release it out into the world to be criticized than to hold it so close to the chest that no one
Yeah.
ever hears it or sees it or watches it. And I just think about like, what if Steven Spielberg never picked up a camera? What if anybody else that you really like, a great writer, let's say Maya Angelou decided that she never want to pick up a pen because she was afraid of the criticism that was going to come with it. Like criticism is a part, or critique. I know criticism is a byproduct of being critiqued, but it's the same thing. But like being critiqued is part of the process.
Yeah. Like, how do you expect to get better if you're? I mean, it's a good thing. Like, it's a good thing to be like. It sucks in the moment to be like, to feel super like vulnerable and like your stuff is being critiqued, and some of it's good and others like the comments you're getting are really, really bad and it's embarrassing. And like my thing was always, it was hard for me to like write anything down because in my mind I was like, well, if I write this down, I write this idea down, like I'm admitting to myself that it's worth being written down. Like it's, there's some part of me that I think it's going to be good.
Sure.
So like that was always really hard for me. But at the same time, like you said, you just have to put yourself out there and be like, well, here it is. Like it's better to do it than not at all and wonder your whole life.
So important.
Yeah, dude, nothing, I don't want to live a life where I get to my deathbed and I have to wonder what if. Do you know, like, and I think that's like a really, gosh, I just don't want to live a life of regret. And I think like regret is the worst, like to be like, man, I wish I would have done this if I would have had enough courage to do it. And it's just something that like, it's just like one of those things where I would much rather be rejected and fail than to regret not doing it. So
because then there's no wonder. Like, at least I know.
And I think failure also helps us realize how much you want to do something. I mean, listening to your first few episodes, it also reminded me, because for me, my big failure, I didn't get kicked out of the house, thank the Lord. I couldn't recover from that. But I did have a college class, which I've shared previously in my podcast, but I was failing like with this music class, and I thought music was the thing I was most talented at. So to be the worst performing in my class sucked so hard, I almost dropped out because I thought this should be the one class I'm not struggling in.
Sure.
But to get through like embracing the suck, and now I realize like I'm so glad that I didn't give up on myself and that I'm here. So, but I wouldn't have wanted it this bad or known this is what I was meant to do if I didn't fail a few years ago.
Sure. Yeah, I remember going through my first portfolio review, and I had like what I thought was like all these awesome images, and
So deep.
It's so deep. Yeah, like, I remember taking the time in the dark room, like dodging and burning the shadows, and like dude, I was like, this is like like. I'm about to get a Pulitzer Prize for this, right? Like, and you didn't even get Pulitzer Prize for photography, but like I thought I was about to, right? So here I am with like my portfolio, and I'm a professor, and there's this one image that I still have. I should probably frame it because my professor like absolutely ripped it into shreds, and I was like in love with it, like as in like this was the best piece of artwork. I mean, I even remember where I was when I shot this image, and I was at a skate park or something like that, and there was a kid who was like went up a ramp and came down and like fell flat on his face. So this picture is it's a kid, he's probably 13, maybe 14 years old. He has a helmet on and he's just laying belly flat, and his skateboard is just slightly.
I love how it's a picture of someone else failing.
Well,
you were like, this is the best
this
thing.
is the best thing. So it's like this picture of his like skateboard. It's like going ever so slightly out of the frame. And I don't know why, but I fell in love with this image. Like, and my professor was like, yeah, your framing is off.
Love that.
Everything was off about this image. And he just like ripped it to shreds. And I thought I was going to get an A, and I ended up getting a C. But what it did was it drove me to take better images. Now, I don't get into the whole like competition of trying to one up my contemporaries, like the other photographers that were in the class. But my goal there was just to take a better image for myself, to create something else that I was going to fall in love with.
Right.
And then I realized very early on that I hate everything that I do. So it's not that I hate it.
Well,
it's just
No,
like
no,
it's just like
we get
agree.
it.
yeah. You put something out there and you're like, man, what in the hell was I
Yes.
thinking?
Mhm.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
why did I think that was a good idea? But I'm glad that I failed. I'm glad I continue to like make images or continue to pursue something that I love. So
Yeah.
No, I
And
agree for that for
that's
sure.
like, I don't know. It's just so interesting to me that how it's all super relatable, I think, for everybody who's a creative, but it's not something that we ever like talk about either.
No, I don't think people really like. No one talks about failing. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I've really had a conversation with anyone in the creative field or not where they've talked about something that they weren't proud of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, people always discuss things that they're proud of. They never really discuss things that they're not proud
Yeah.
of.
It's not like you have
That-
to put that on your resume.
That's so toxic.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not asset
100%.
for.
That's so toxic.
It
Like,
is.
community is supposed to be helpful, but for me, something that really gets me in a bad spot is comparison.
Mhm.
Comparison kills me because I
Yeah.
think like on my own, this piece of music that I've written is great, and then I listen to all these other great creatives who've had wins. I don't hear
Sure.
their bad songs. I just hear the ones that get
Right.
released, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
my song isn't that. So for me,
You
I
know,
don't
that's
know
like
how
that's
that
like
is.
one song out of like 50. that they
Right,
wrote.
I
Like,
know
you
that, but getting
Yeah.
through that mental
Yeah.
block, like I think it's so great that some creators are now like, let's share
Yeah.
our L's.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
because
and
it's
learn
really
from that because
it is really
our
toxic.
best photographers or
Uh-huh.
writers or musicians
Uh-huh.
have L's like every day. The same
Literally.
day I'm having an L,
Yeah,
they're
every
having an L.
day.
They
Yeah.
just don't share it,
Uh-huh.
but
Like
it helps.
some are so bad that they don't even ever see the light of day. That's how bad they
That's
are.
how bad, like,
Like-
yeah. And I tell people this like all the time. So I speak at several conferences a year. I'm speaking at 4 this fall.
Boop, boop.
Yeah, whoop, 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 whoop,
So,
whoop.
but one of the things that I always sort of remind like the conference goers is that like stop looking at the finished product. And I think that's kind of like what you just caught yourself
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Like we so often I'm guilty of this as well. Like I sometimes I have to pull myself out of it. Is the best way that I can even describe it is just give something that people are very relatable. Like everyone looks at Beyonce today, right? Like Beyonce's like, you know, she's got her whole gang, the Beehive, right?
Mhm.
But she didn't have a Beehive when she was Beyonce Knowles 25 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, where she was just an up and coming artist trying to find her footing in the industry.
Yeah.
And back when she was, you know, like struggling as an artist and couldn't get picked up by a label. But today we look at Beyonce and that's what we pursue.
Right.
But we don't pursue the bad stuff that she had to go through to get there.
Mhm.
And I think that's the one thing that we constantly, like myself included, like constantly fall into that trap.
Yeah.
Like, let's look at the finished product. And I would bet you that Beyonce doesn't even think that she's a finished product yet.
Mhm.
You know, you're really not finished until you're 6 feet under. So like that's when the product is finished.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's you know, it's understanding that creativity and being a creative, and no matter what you're doing, if it's a podcast or if it's a film that you're creating or if it's music that you're singing or writing and trying to get through, that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
You know, everyone wants to be a one-hit wonder, but really
Right.
we want sustainability.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just kind of like, yeah, I want to have this one song that pops,
Yeah.
but then you have to one up that,
Yeah.
you know.
And when you do that, also,
Relatable.
you end up sounding like comparison. When you compare so much, it just ends up sounding like or looking like everybody else, which
Sure.
isn't at all interesting. That's not what people want. Even
Right.
if something is like pop music right now and whatever is happening in pop music, I couldn't tell you. It's like super popular, but you know, every song that comes out like every 2 months from an artist, I can't distinguish between them. Like I have no idea who
Yeah.
these people. And I think it was Barbra Streisand. I don't know, but when she was up and coming and just getting her career started, people would comment on her voice and be like, well, don't you need to, you know, you need to sound more like this. And she'd be like, why would I want to, like when I sing, you know, it's Barbra Streisand.
Yeah.
You know,
Love
it's me
that.
because
Love
it's
that.
my voice. Why would I want to sound like somebody else and you would not be able to tell who it is?
Yeah.
Why would I compare myself to somebody else who has a voice the exact same as me?
Mhm.
Because like, why would I do that? Why would I try to change my voice to sound like someone else? You're not going to know
Yeah.
it's Barbra Streisand. And like
Sure.
now we know who Barbra Streisand is, and like it's because she just stayed her own personality. She kept her voice the way it was. It's like a little rough, and you know, but you know it's Barbra Streisand.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's the same thing with people who are creative. I think when it comes to comparison, like. Yeah, I think some is necessary and healthy just to be like, well, what are other people doing? Because you don't want to go down a path that's just going to suck, like, you know.
Well,
Oh,
no, yeah,
dude,
for
but
sure.
it's
full
still
stop.
it's
I
still
think
a you know, it's kind of a hard line to.
it
would
is
say.
a hard line to play, and I think
Yeah.
that like we all have to not to quote Beyonce, not that like I'm a massive Beyonce fan, but there is a
Can't say that in front of Gabby.
I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not to say that I'm not a massive fan. I'm a fan.
I know you are.
I'm not a massive fan, but there is that line as was it hot sauce in my bag swag that
Love
we
it.
kind of have to carry that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a little bravado and a little
Diva song.
yeah, I don't really want to even say diva. I mean, it's more self-awareness. Like, hey, I know this is where I suck at. This is where my shortfalls.
Yeah.
I know, but I also know this is where my strengths are. And, so having that self-awareness to understand, like, this is where I need to grow and this is where I'm pretty confident in. I would say that, like, I didn't really figure that aspect of it out until I was 27, where I knew that this is what I was going to stand for as a creative or as an artist. I always feel weird like when people say artist, because I feel like an artist is like a musician and I can't
Yeah.
sing.
I think
so-
painter, but
yeah.
I think of everything that I can't do.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, so
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's
I was
good.
digressing there.
27.
I
Here
still
I am,
feel like
I'm about to
that's-
exit college thinking I know what I'm doing, but I don't.
No, I was
And
going
have
to
be
say
okay with
27
that.
still seems like kind of early to me. That's why I'm like,
Well, yeah,
27.
it's two
Wow,
different
dang.
perspectives.
Well,
Respect
I
that.
think
It
the
is.
thing is, this is like, it's when you experience enough like crummy stuff in life, and as you early on, I mean, I don't want to say it's not like a blessing that I was sleeping in my car for 8 weeks and I was homeless. It wasn't a blessing by any means of the imagination, but like I can look back at it now and understand that one, it was my own fault why I was living in my car. No matter how much I initially I blamed my dad and how I wanted to, give him the double eagle and just be like, kind of like that kind of thing. But like I realized that everything that I went through got me where I'm at today. And I made and there are times in my life where I felt like I could have made several different decisions and gone down several different roads. But the road that I went down, I know is the right road for me.
Yeah.
Do you know? Like, so it's and I'm very fortunate, like, that I have friends that I had from high school and college that I still talk to today that held me accountable then, that hold me accountable now.
And they can see your growth as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like my friend Chris, who I played football with in high school, and we both went on to play D1 sports. He sent me just like this super kind text message. It just kind of came out of the blue because generally, like in a group text, he's the one that's constantly ragging me for different things. But it was just like it was just a good reminder that although I can be down on myself, there are people out there who I trust. Like, and I think that's like super, super important to get people out that you trust that are going to be like brutally honest with you when you screw up, and are also going to be and hold you accountable. I think like I've been fortunate to have those friends like that, and that's more so a blessing, than living in my car. That was just
Right.
It was just an end result of how I ended up here.
No.
Yeah.
And I think for sure having friends that help keep you accountable, like I know for Gabby, she'll tell me like that wasn't so good, but like coming from her, I
You'll
know
tell me
it's-
the same thing.
Yeah, that I can trust and rely on, and it won't hurt as bad, because I feel like as a creative, anything I make, I can't detach it from me. Like if you attack or
Yeah.
criticize my work, you're criticizing me.
Feels personal.
It feels personal, and that's
Sure.
really difficult. Like I don't know how that is for you, Tim,
Yeah.
like with being a wedding photographer,
Yeah.
because I know like it's also a business. That must hurt so much
Right.
more. Like
Like people are paying.
you're not just
for-
marketing your photographs, like you're
Right.
marketing yourself, your
Yeah.
personality. So when someone rejects like the booking a job, you're like you feel rejected, and I feel like it
Yeah.
can be really something that you can struggle with all your life.
Yeah.
That's hard as a
Yeah,
human, for
I
me.
think
Yeah.
like one of the things that like I get clients that don't go with me all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and they've decided that there was another photographer that was a better fit. Yeah, that sucks sometimes. Like sometimes when it's like even people that and they decide to go with somebody else. And I just think that, hey, ultimately I understand that your wedding day, you have to have faith and trust in the person. You're going to spend no other time on your wedding, the photographer that you choose is going to spend the most time with you on your wedding day. Not your parents, not your spouse, no one. Like the photographer is going to be the one person who's going
I
to be
didn't
there.
think about that, but you're right.
Yeah, it's going to be the one
Too much
person.
pressure for me.
Yeah, is there. So like to me, that's extremely important that we have a connection and that we're the right fit. So if you don't choose me, then it probably wasn't. We probably weren't going to be the right fit. But I know that as my dad used to say, there's always a profession to get into. People will always get married, cars will always break down, and people will always get sick. So if you find one of those
So
professions,
positive.
if you find one of those
Yeah.
professions and then be extremely well in it, or good in
Yeah.
it, then you can find a living doing it. Now, I didn't pick wedding photography. Wedding photography, I didn't pick photography. Photography picked me. That's why,
Of course.
that's not
just
the case.
destined to it.
Yeah, I fell into it. Honestly,
Yeah.
I like literally fell into it, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well,
So
I mean, because of that, though, was there ever a moment where you didn't want to do wedding photography anymore? Like, was there ever a day that you had that was like, you went to go photograph a wedding and you were like, that sucked. That was horrible.
That's
I
it,
didn't
my
get
last
one picture.
Yeah.
Like, that was good.
you know what? I've shot over 300 weddings over the last 10 years, 343 to be exact. And there's only been one wedding where I was like, oh, this was like,
I should
wasn't,
laugh,
wasn't,
but I really want to know now.
I know.
was a train wreck. And I'll go ahead and tell the story real quick since we have just
Yeah.
a little bit of time. The bride had lost quite a bit of, she'd gotten her garter and she had lost quite a bit of weight from the time she got her garter to the time that the day of the wedding. So the groom, everything was going fine. Everything was going smoothly up to this point. But I remember being in the room as she's like getting dressed and getting her dress on and stuff like that. And I overheard her tell one of her bridesmaids, maybe her maid of honor, I can't quite remember who because this is several years ago. And she said, hey, remind me to pull my garter down because I've lost weight. It keeps falling down my leg. So she had hiked it like pretty high up her leg to kind of keep it there so it wouldn't fall down. So she had like, this big dress and with a lot of lace and was it tulle?
Tulle.
Tulle.
Stuff, I don't know.
Yeah, tulle is always like a weird word to say. Like, yeah, tulle, like tulle.
that meshy tulle.
Yeah, meshy tulle. So during the getting the garter is like a very traditional at weddings. Not so much anymore, but it used to be.
Because it's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It's a weird thing to sit and witness, right?
Right.
So the groom goes up
I've done that before.
under the groom goes up under the dress to find the garter, and it felt like an eternity.
Oh my God.
He couldn't find it. So
How do you lose
No.
it?
so the mother of the bride comes, yanks him out from underneath her dress on the
my
dance
gosh.
floor in front of everyone. Some choice words were said between the groom and the mother. And that was the one wedding I walked away from being like, yeah, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Oh my gosh.
But I had a wedding the next day, and that wedding was awesome. So
So
I
it
will,
redeemed itself.
it redeemed itself. But I will say this: it's really difficult to not experience happiness because, like, generally speaking, up to that point, it's the happiest day in a lot of people's lives, and generally, it's a pretty jovial event.
Yeah.
It's like it'd be different if I was a funeral photographer. Like I
Well.
would probably be like I'm out, right? Like, I can't do this.
anymore.
But wedding photography, people are generally really happy, and I'm a people person, so I kind of get off of that energy. Like, and it's just easier to be a part of that. So I don't know if that makes sense
It
at all.
does
But
make
no,
sense.
I've never had. I never walked away from a wedding. Maybe that one time where I was like, "This is just like."
Well, that wasn't even like I thought it was bad images. You
No,
just,
no.
horrifying.
You know
So
what?
it goes
Just a
through.
horrifying moment.
I would argue that my first 3 years of wedding photography, my images really sucked pretty hard.
People still paid for them, though.
People still paid for
still paid
them.
for 'em.
Yeah.
They still paid for them, but I learned from the mistakes, like of like being out of place during the first kiss, being on the side and not in the center of the aisle. Now I ask the officiant, "Hey, dude, what's the key word that I need to hear from when I know you're getting ready to, so I can be in the right position?" But like I tell like my clients now that like, hey, your wedding will be the best wedding that I will ever shoot until the next wedding. And I tell my
Yeah.
clients the same thing. It's not necessarily because I'm trying to one up myself. I'm not trying to one up another photographer.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Yeah,
Well, that's a good perspective, though.
yeah.
it is.
Do you just compare it to your previous work?
I
Which-
mean, that's the thing is like you always want to be better than I feel like a lot of people want to be better than somebody else, but it's like, well, dude, were you better than you were last week? Like you might want to
Yeah.
also
That's
compare
the
to
more
your,
important question.
Sure. Yeah,
that's something that you need to also consider when doing creative things. I think just because like when you are creative, I think it's easy, like you were talking about earlier, like to just compare yourself to others. But it's like, well, as long as you're improving and you know you're improving,
Right.
like from who you were last year, then you know what? If someone is still out there better than you, because there's always gonna be someone better
There's
than
always
you,
gonna be someone
then what
better
does it
than you.
matter? Like as long as you,
Yeah.
I don't want to be cliche and be like, as long as you're happy with yourself, but like as long as you're happy with
Yeah.
your progress and you are progressing and you're working hard at
Well,
it, then you
yeah.
should be proud of yourself.
I think the one thing that we should always know is that we're always going to evolve. Our taste will always change. And who we are as a creative will change because of the people that we are influenced by. And I know it sounds weird, but like I like to consume a lot of stuff that isn't photography. I still consume some photography, but I love consuming, like random. I was reading this on Monet. It was a silly like video. It was like maybe like 45 minutes long, and it was just on Claude Monet. And I was like, I was like really enamored by that. Like, you see this dude like sitting in the middle of flowers, and what he visually sees versus what's actually there are totally two different things.
Yeah.
But I just love the idea of looking at how other people create other mediums. Because I feel like if you consume only one genre of creativeness, of art, or whatever, then your work is going to become relatively mundane.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so like
Like it'll become kind of flat, one note kind of thing.
Yeah.
yeah, like you're just doing, if I'm only going to look at photography, then my photography is only going to look like photography. I would love to create an image that looks like a painting.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
Do you know
I
what-
never thought about that, but wow.
This makes me think of, and I think I commented on it. You post something on Instagram. It was a picture, and it didn't even show a face. It was literally like the bottom of
Yeah.
the woman, and I
Oh,
And it was out of
love-
focus.
Yes,
Yeah.
I adore, because it reminded me of a story.
Yeah.
Like I could see that being like, I don't know, like in a book, or like there's such a story behind that photo that I was
Yeah.
like, I want to like write a story to this photo. Like what is,
Yeah.
it was just so
You can draw
like, it was one of my
inspiration from that.
favorite. It didn't even have like the face of the bride in it. It was
Right.
just one of my favorite photos like I've ever seen.
Yeah,
post.
I think one of the things that and this just kind of goes back into the ebbs and flows of being a creative. Like I always want to see differently. Do you know, like I don't want to see the same thing. And when you're when you've shot as many weddings as I have, the first several 50 felt very fast paced. Now everything is slowed down for me as a friend. It's still fast paced,
Right.
Yeah.
but it's slowed down because I know what to expect.
Right.
And when I know what to expect, then I get into the habit of just shooting what's in front of me. Instead, I want to shoot what's not in front of me, like the small details, like a bride walking away and it's slightly blurry and it's just her hand holding her dress. And I'm never going. I learned this from another photographer, Jennifer Moore, she's brilliant. She's in Canada, and she sees things very abstractly than how I see things. And she said something once at a conference that we were both speaking at, and she said, I will never take a picture of an inanimate object. I won't take a picture of a dress hanging in a window. Why? Like, what are you gonna do with that photograph
Yeah.
to begin with? You're gonna do nothing. Maybe you might put it in your wedding album to remember it by, but the dress, the biggest detail is the people. We're humans. The biggest detail are the humans that are in the photographs, not the objects that we have. So she's like, so if I'm gonna take a picture of a dress, I'm gonna make sure that I have a hand, the human element
Yeah.
touching it. If I'm gonna take a picture of a table setting, I want to take a picture of someone putting the setting down.
Right.
And I was like, I had never really thought of it that way. We're there to celebrate two humans combining their lives together and moving forward, but we get so wrapped up in all the details of flowers and the place settings and the food, but the two biggest details are the two people committing their lives to each other.
Right.
And that really kind of changed me. And it was one sentence out of an hour-long presentation. It's the one thing that has stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
really like that perspective, like changing the way you see.
Yeah.
For me, I can see that changing the way I hear as a musician. And I think what we consume plays such a big part in our life as
Yeah.
creatives. Like
Yeah.
usually you say, don't consume, create more, which I completely stand by.
Mhm.
But I also am really picky with what I consume. I feel like we can only consume what we like. But I
Sure.
try to push myself to consume
Yeah.
music that I don't like or don't understand. And keep listening to it and understand at least what the artist was trying to communicate, so I can appreciate at least the work that went behind it, even if I still don't end up liking it. I usually do.
Yeah.
I used to not
Yeah.
like bebop, like
Yeah,
all these
yeah.
classes. Like I used to hate it, and now at least I can appreciate and understand. And it's made me a better musician. And I think
Sure.
having
Right.
to push ourselves to look at images in a new way. Like some photographers might see that as a disaster to have an image out of focus, but to be able to see the story behind that, I think, is beautiful.
Yeah,
I
I think we get so wrapped up. You probably experience this a little bit. Well, both of you probably do. Experience this. We get so wrapped up around the tools that we use to create, the instruments, the cameras, the gear. It's like gear.
Everything.
Books, in Gabby's perspective, or I mean, I'm not 100% sure. Like, probably even like writing, the stuff the pens that you use to write
Yeah.
with.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Writers love their pens.
Writers love their pens, right? Like we get so wrapped up in the tools that we use to create our craft that what we do is we get more wrapped up into that than we do into creating.
Yeah.
Drag us.
Everybody at
So-
the table.
I love this new thing I got.
Yeah.
Like, what are you gonna make with
it's-
it?
Yeah.
And
And,
it's like-
does it help you be better, or do you just kind of suck
It's a
in?
crutch. It can be a crutch sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes your best
Yeah.
work comes when you have like nothing.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, I think some of my best work that I've ever created was, even though I look back at it now, I was like, what? What was I thinking? But like my first few years as a photographer, man, I had like this like Canon 5D. It's like it's still, I think, arguably one of the best cameras on the market. You can get it for $200 now. But back then, I wanted the newer camera. But not thinking about creating with the tools that I had. I was worrying about what was in my bag or what my wallet could buy next, instead of really concentrating on, dude, like the masters before us, the people that were masters of their craft before us, had far less superior tools.
Yeah.
Than they had their brains and their hands.
That's it.
and
That's
like random stuff, right? And here we are, like, oh, if I only had this guitar,
Yeah.
or if I only had this camera, or this pen, or something like that, then I could be the writer I want to be, or
Yeah.
then I can be the photographer that I want to be.
Yeah.
And
And
get so lazy. It's an excuse.
it is an excuse, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, I don't know. I think we just think the more we have, or like the more that we add to it, the better it's going to. Like you said, it's a crutch. But at the same time, it's like, well, dude, like you said, like people were doing this 400 years ago, and they didn't have anything. Like they
Yeah.
were barely literate. So I think you can figure it out.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
so
Yeah,
it's just
I
like,
love it. Yeah,
I don't know, stuff like that.
yeah,
But
and
I'm
all that
so
jazz.
dead.
and all that jazz. And on that note,
And on
we
that
are
note-
literate, so we should be doing way more than we are doing right now.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
Well, thank you so much for being
thanks,
here.
This was fun.
guys.
This was fun. I think we did okay. I think we did pretty good.
Oh, it's
Well-
good that we had a time limit. If not, we just
Yeah,
keep talking.
we
and
had.
talking.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the
we
thing.
just love to talk.
Yeah, I can talk and talk and talk. So it's not.
can
It's not.
too.
This is kind of like one of those things that where I was like, when I think after I like dropped my first episode, I had a text from a friend like, why hadn't you been? What took you so long?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. I was like, I don't know. Like you just like I can just talk and I'm passionate about a lot of things. I'm passionate about creativity. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yes.
Of course.
Where can the people follow you?
So you can follow me at BigDaddyKane.com.
Oh.
Oh my! That was good.
I'm just joking. No, so
Listen,
on the
I was going to let
computers.
you go and be like, you know what? That's where you can follow me, people.
So yes, you can follow me at timriddick.com. That is my website. And I also run the morningteapodcast.com.
Subscribe.
Please subscribe. You can also sign up for the newsletter or whatever email
always.
for when it drops. I'm not a great writer like Gabby, so you'll have to
They're very aesthetically pleasing.
you see my all of my Oxford comma splices.
Ours aren't as fancy.
Yeah.
I know. We need to make them fancier. I need to up my
Fancier.
game.
So yeah, so you can find me there and on Instagram and Twitter as Tim Riddick, because I jumped on early on those platforms.
There you go.
And so
That's
yeah.
All right.
So that's where you can find me.
Thank you
As
so
always.
much.
Hey,
No, we
thanks,
loved having
guys.
you.
Yes, our first special guest.
Well, hopefully you have me back.
No.
Yes.
Yeah,
This is
awesome.
our,
More.
what, like 33rd? We can have you at the
32nd.
63rd?
Oh,
63rd.
Something like that. We're
63rd.
past 30.
Past when we're
knows?
past 30 if we get there.
And you can unsubscribe to our podcast.
You can unsubscribe anytime you
We
want.
always say that.
Follow us.
Unsubscribe. Well,
Or,
hopefully you don't. Is it unsubscribe?
Yeah,
or
it's a joke.
Don't
Unsubscribe.
unsubscribe. Not after listening to my episode. Maybe the next.
okay,
maybe the
subscribe.
next guest.
Keep yourselves subscribed and then move on. But thank you guys so much for listening. And follow us on social media if you want. Unsubscribe or subscribe.
Up
Either
to
way,
you.
it's up to you. And we'll see you in the next one.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Of course. Of course.